So welcome to all of our parents and guardians and seniors. So just to give you a little preview of what you should expect from the program and what you should leave tonight with, you will be hearing about and learning about the various components of the post-secondary high school planning process and the application process. You're going to gain an understanding of our process, our Westboro High School specific process for application procedures. Students, we're hoping that through tonight's program, you'll learn to take ownership of this process to reach your personal goals, whatever those may be after high school. I know we do a lot of talking about college specifically, especially in this program, but we do want to recognize that some of you might still be figuring out what your plan is. You might have other plans, and we're here to work with all of you on that. And then just to let you know that you will have access to tonight's slides. We'll make sure we get those out for you. So throughout your students' years here at Westboro, part of something that our department has kind of ingrained in a lot of the information that we've given the students are these 4 themes that you'll see in front of you here. And we really think they relate quite well to the post-secondary process. Students specifically taking ownership of the process, making it their own. Organizing, so keeping all their materials, all the procedures organized. Self-advocacy is huge, so recognizing when you have questions and making sure you come see your counselors, talk to your parents, talk to your teachers to get help with that. And inquiry, asking those questions. So before we get rolling, I do want to introduce our department. So I'm Kristen Kyra. I'm one of the school counselors. I'll introduce the rest of the department and they'll just stand up and turn around and wave so that you can match the name with the face. So we have Miss Adams, Mrs. Durbano, Mr. Roche, Mrs. Deleo, Miss Greenspan, and then not joining us tonight is our super helpful, very famous administrative assistant, Mrs. Gail Kennefic. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, as I call it, as counselors, we want to recognize for students and for families that this process can bring on stress. It's a natural part of this, so we want to recognize that with you all. It's a lot of the work that we do with students, especially with seniors who are feeling overwhelmed. They have a lot on their plate, they have a lot of questions, figuring out how to balance all of that. So we help them recognize those signs, we help them come up with strategies to work through those, we help them organize, and you're seeing sort of a little icon there. This is a breathing practice that a lot of us use with many of our students, but it's something that certainly helps when we're feeling heightened stress. So just to recognize, as before we jump into this, that that's very natural, and that's an additional piece of the work that we do with our seniors if necessary. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Greenspan.
So we will talk a little bit about some of the current trends in the college admissions process. As you've probably seen as you're looking at schools, many colleges and universities still have test optional policies through this year. So it's up to you if you decide you want to send your SAT or ACT scores. Typically we recommend if you're at or above the average or middle 50% or whatever they report, because it's all different, to send to them, and if not, and they're test optional, you don't have to. There's also still an additional COVID question on the Common App. So you'll notice on the Common App there's a place to put your essay, a place to write additional info, so sometimes students choose to disclose other information there, and then there's another question for anything significant about COVID and how that's kind of disrupted your high school experience in any way. We do in our school profile cover some of the changes that have happened at school at Westboro, so there's no need to rewrite all of that. But if there's anything individual to you that you feel like it would be valuable for colleges to know, that's a good place to put it. This is also your reminder to be really mindful of what you put on the internet. Having worked in college admissions, I can tell you that admission officers are not going to Google you, and they're not going to look you up on Instagram or TikTok. But if something comes their way that is unsavory, if you're saying something on the internet that would not be allowed at school, it is probably something that colleges will not be happy to see if they find out about it. So it's really important to be mindful of the pictures and the videos that you post, as well as any of the text posts that you have. The last thing is demonstrated interest. This has been huge in the past 10 to 15 years in terms of showing colleges that you're interested in them. They track this, they want to know. Not every school is going to dig into it, but they want to see that students have done their research, right? It's important to apply to schools that you like, that you've seen, that you know a lot about, and they're making sure that students have sort of done their research too. So a little bit about this. What counts as demonstrated interest? On the left, you'll see all the things that typically do. Typically, if you have to fill out a form with your name and your high school and your email and all of that information, it's probably counting towards your demonstrated interest. The two biggest things are when you visit campus, doing a tour and an information session, or whatever it is that they offer there. That's going to show schools that you've really done your research because you were there. You got to talk to a current student. You got to do all of these things and potentially got to meet some of the people that work there. Some schools will offer interviews, not all do. Some of them, they're typically optional, and many schools are offering both in-person interviews on campus for when you visit, that's something you can sign up for, or virtual interviews. So there's many schools that are offering virtual interviews at times that are really convenient for students. And so if you can't make it out to a school, but you're really interested and you want a chance to kind of talk to someone that's there, a virtual interview can be a really nice choice. Lastly, direct contact with admissions officers. That can help show a little bit of interest, but I want to be a little bit cautious about that because it's important if you're contacting them that you're asking them questions and you have sort of a reason for that contact. It's a little bit odd to just send an email with a bunch of information and no other questions, right? People don't really do that in real life, go up and give you information and then wait. So if you have questions, please use them as a resource. I've done it before. They like working with students. They want to answer your questions. So if things are unclear and it's specific to that particular school, I really recommend reaching out to someone in their office. Other helpful ways to learn about colleges, these don't count as demonstrated interest, but they're still really important as you're making really big life choices. Talking to current students. If you know someone from Westboro or somewhere else that goes somewhere, ask them questions, get to know their experience. Ask them what their favorite class was or what clubs they're involved in, what their favorite thing about the school is. Students love to talk about the colleges that they go to. And then following colleges on social media. That can be so much fun to see what kind of events are going on campus. What is their student government doing? Do they have speakers coming to campus? What kind of concerts are there? What are the sports teams like? You can get a lot of information about that on colleges' social media that they use internally to learn a little bit more about what's going on campus, especially if you're not able to visit, but you want to learn a little bit more. So looking at lists, tell me who in the room has finalized their college list? Yeah, we're all sort of still kind of thinking about it a little bit. I didn't see too many hands. That's totally fine. As you're thinking about your list, fit matters more than anything else. Being able to picture yourself on that college campus, getting a sense of what the academic fit is like, what the social fit is like. Those are so important. Financial fit as well, right? Is that something that your family is going to be able to afford? We're also really hoping that students are finding balance in the schools that they're applying to. So we have a bell curve right here, and so when you're curating your college list, you want most of the schools to be within this big peak, right? Those are the target schools, the schools that you're a really good match for in terms of your academic profile and your personal interests and desires. Then it's always healthy to have a few schools that are a little bit reachier, right? Ones where you're not really sure if you'd be able to get in, but you want to shoot your shot, right? A couple of those can be really helpful. It's hard when a list is mostly reaches, right? We want to have a healthy number, and we also want to have a healthy number of likely schools, or sometimes we call them safety schools. And that can be really nice, especially if you're choosing to apply early action. You just know that you're into a college a little bit earlier, and that there's schools that you really like, right? When you add a school that's more likely, it has to be a school that you'd be willing to go to, because you very much might go there. In terms of application rounds, early action and early decision applications are coming up pretty soon. Those are typically in November 1st, November 15th, December 1st. Some schools offer early decision too. You probably have talked about this, but early decision is the binding agreement that says if you're accepted, you will go to that school. You can only apply early decision to one school, and you don't have to apply early decision to any schools. But if you chose to do that, you can only do one. The only exception is if you applied early decision 2, right? You didn't get into an ED1 school, you didn't apply ED1 anywhere, you could submit an early decision 2 application. Other schools have what's called rolling admissions. So when they get their applications, their deadline's a little bit flexible. They'll tell you the last possible day, usually, that they'll accept an application. But if you apply, and you can apply at any time, they'll let you know within maybe 6 to 10 weeks after you submit your application. This is different from other schools because other schools with hard deadlines will also announce all of their decisions in the same day or two to everyone. Sometimes they post it beforehand or they email you in advance of when the decision is coming out. Sometimes you just get an email and all of a sudden you have a decision. And I just really like this quote at the bottom, which is, "College is a match to be made, not a prize to be won." So thinking about the applications. There's a few different applications to fill out. Who here has looked at the Common App? Raise your hands. Oh yeah, I see a lot of hands. That's pretty much the most common way that students apply to colleges. Most of the schools are probably going to be on the Common App. There are a few exceptions, and Common App schools, while you fill the Common App out, each school is going to have their own individual questions that they ask you, and they might have additional writing supplements. Those supplements exist in a few different places, so it's helpful to kind of click around those specific school questions to see if there's an additional essay that you have to write. There's also something called the Coalition application. Has anybody heard of this? Okay, a few people. Really similar to the Common App, basically the same thing, different website. And then many schools have institutional applications. So that's an application that's on their specific website that you fill out. It's all the same information, but some schools like it when you put it on their website. Some schools will accept different types of applications, so you get to pick the one that works the best for you. Often we encourage students, if you're already applying to a lot of schools on the Common App, you don't need to reinvent the wheel and apply to schools in other ways. They typically never have a preference as to which application you submit. They want you to submit the one that's the most convenient for you and the one that you're able to put all of your thought into. And then essay writing. Who's excited about essay writing? Okay. Well, I am. It's my favorite part. So, the Common App personal statement. If people could give me thumbs up being, I love writing my college essay, to thumbs down, this is the worst thing I've ever had to do, to somewhere in the middle. How do we feel about writing essays? Okay, I see a lot in the middle, some thumbs down. I don't think I see a thumbs up. Okay. So the goal of the Common App personal statement is really to show off your personality and interests. They want to get to know you, right? They want to see you as more than just a bunch of numbers and a transcript and all of that. The second part is demonstrating your writing ability, right? Showing that you're prepared for college by showing that you're a capable writer who can tell a story, be engaging, and do something interesting, make it interesting. In terms of what is really powerful in a college essay, we've outlined a few sort of essential items within there. It's really important to make your essay unique through the details. There's really no topic that's truly taboo that no one has ever written about. I'd like to sometimes think there are, but really they've seen a little bit of everything. But any essay can be unique as long as you're giving so much personal detail that no one else in the world could have written it. I used to tell students when I was working in admissions, if you dropped your essay on the floor of the school and your best friend picked it up, they know that that was your essay. Would there be so many details about who you are and how you think and the interests that you have that they would know for sure that that was you? Number two is it's more important to be likable in the essay than it is to be impressive. Being likable is almost the entire goal of this essay, because all of your accomplishments and the amazing things that you've done, the grades that you've gotten, those are in other places in your application. This is your time to really show them kind of what your personality is like and kind of talk a little bit in your own voice. Number 3, and this one is mostly for the parents. Teenager tone and language are really important. They expect that these are written by 17, 18-year-olds. The average age of an admissions reader is 26, which is a lot closer to teenage culture than many of us are. And so they expect that teenagers are writing it, they expect to hear their language. It shouldn't be so informal, like talking to a friend, but it's more like talking to a teacher or a counselor or an adult at school, that type of tone. And then number 4 is to always have a second set of eyes look at your essay before you submit it. I'd say maybe not like a 4th, 5th, and 6th set of eyes, right? Too many cooks in the kitchen at that point. But having someone else look over it and give them, give you a little bit of feedback can be really helpful. And it's sometimes helpful to read it out loud too. Sometimes you catch some things in the way that you wrote when you read an essay out loud. You could read it out loud to a friend or a family member, or just read it out loud quietly in your room, and you'll be able to get a good sense of how the essay sounds before you submit it. Many schools also have supplemental essays. Yeah, okay, head nods. If they're labeled as recommended or optional, that is typically coded language for required. Some of them, there's a few out there that are truly required. So if you had one and you're like really not sure, just ask your counselor, we probably know. But typically they really want to see the answers to those questions. And some of them are really fun. Elon University has a really fun set of questions where you list your top 5 of anything and then write 250 words about why. You pick the category, you pick the things on the list. Like, I want to write that essay myself. Many schools are asking questions though on why are you applying to this college? What's interesting to you about us? Why do you want to major in what you want to major in? Those are pretty formulaic, and it's really important to be specific in those types of essays. They're looking to see that you did your research, so do your research. Go on the website, find a class that looks interesting to you, and put the name of the class there. Find a club that looks interesting, or a program, or a building, or something that's really attractive to you about that campus, and mention that specifically in that supplement. That's gonna go a really long way. Once you mention that, you also want to talk about, well, why is that a great fit for you? What is it about your interests and your previous experiences that makes you a great fit for that particular thing on campus, or the 4 things that you choose to list that you find really interesting? And we are all, as counselors, happy to help you kind of think about these essays, talk through your ideas if you haven't started them yet, or read them over if you have a draft that you're feeling ready to submit. Activities. So who's filled out the activities section of the Common App? All right, it's cool. It's kind of a finicky form, right? You only get to list 10, but if you have overflow activities, you can always put those in the additional information section in a list. So you can still capture all of the amazing things that you've done, but pick your most meaningful activities. Not the things that were a little bit extra that you maybe did because you thought they'd look good. Pick the things that you love, the things that bring you the most joy, and the things that you're most willing and interested in doing when you get to college. That's what they're really trying to figure out. So you get to pick 10. You can order them most meaningful first. If you fill it out, you can reorder them after you've filled it out. There's some funky little arrows to be able to do that. Anything you do outside of the classroom can count. If you have responsibilities at home, like looking after younger siblings or cooking dinner for your family, that counts. You spend a lot of time doing that probably, and they want to know what you're up to. So anything that you're doing, any way that you're contributing to your community, and your family, and your school, and your friendships, they like to know a lot about that. And really showing what you're committed to and passionate about. Many of us have also had activities canceled because of COVID, which is totally normal. The admissions officers, their activities were also canceled because of COVID. So they get it. In the activities section, you can write, I was on the volleyball team, but at the end of freshman year or sophomore year, we weren't able to do it. If you have space within those 150 characters to write that in description, you can. But if you don't, you could always write that in the COVID question about, here are some activities that I really wanted to be able to do, but I wasn't able to. They totally understand that. You don't have to give them a big explanation. It happened to most of us, that things that we liked to do, we weren't able to do anymore. But you don't have to fill up the entire space to make a really big impact, right? It's more about what's meaningful and what's interesting and what you care about than how many things there are on there and how diverse they are. What really matters is that it's representative of you and what you love. And then the other materials. Because there's always a few other moving parts, right? So there's quite a few financial items that you might have to do. The FAFSA opens on October 1st, that's this weekend. So filling that out can be really important if you're applying for need-based financial aid. Many schools require the CSS profile, typically they're private schools. It's basically the same thing as the FAFSA, but on the College Board's website. I would check and make sure that you have schools that require it, because if you don't, then there's no need to fill it out. If you choose to send standardized test scores to a school, you are responsible for sending those official test score reports through ACT or through the College Board. I recommend doing that a little bit before the deadline too. And fun fact, if you're using a MacBook, use Google Chrome when you send it. That will eliminate any glitches that might happen. If you're applying for arts-based programs or performing arts programs, portfolios and auditions, there's a slightly different timeline for every kind of type of school, so we're happy to work individually with students that need additional support in prepping portfolios or getting ready for auditions. And then interviews, right? Those are an additional kind of piece of your application if you choose to do it. Some schools will still take interviews after the application deadline, but I check beforehand before you decide you're going to do that later. If you have questions about any specific schools required or recommended items, we really encourage you to interact directly with that school and to ask. I'm also always happy to call an admissions office and ask a question, but since this is really the student's time to be in the driver's seat and practice a little bit of adulthood before going off and doing amazing things, I recommend you send that email or you make that call, right? That can be really helpful and important and empowering in this process to feel like you're doing something that's meaningful. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Roche, right?
Hello, everybody. Oh, I'm a little taller than them. So, like Ms. Friesman said, I am Kaylee DeRoche, one of the school counselors here. So the first thing I want to start talking about is services for students with disabilities in college. So anybody with a documented disability will still be eligible for services in college. Obviously, each school varies. Each school will have different requirements, things that you need to send in. But basically, if you go to college and you have what we call, a 504 or an IEP, what you would do is you would go to whatever the disability services office is at your school. You would bring any testing, any documentation, your plan from high school, and you just kind of show it to them and say, hey, this is what I had in high school. What can you do for me? I mean, you might want to say it in a different way than that, but basically you're saying, this is what I had in high school, how can we replicate this in college? You may not have all the same accommodations that you had in high school, but you should be able to get a lot of similar ones. But the most important part of this process is that this office will not talk to your parents, okay? If you are on a plan, you're gonna have to do this mostly on your own. Obviously, mom and dad can sit in the background and kind of help you with any questions that may arise. But they will not talk to your parents because you are an adult. So just keep that in mind. It's your responsibility to self-advocate. My suggestion is once you know where you're going, get in contact with that office and make sure you start that process sooner than later. There's nothing worse than getting to school and not having the accommodations that you really need to access curriculum. And if you have any questions, please ask your counselor. We are more than happy to help. I'm more than happy to work with you on who do I reach out to and what do I need to send, what documentation do I need, okay? And to a different topic, college athletics. I mean, as a senior, if you are planning to play a college sport, you're most likely already talking to coaches or, coaches have tried talking to you. If you are planning on going to or playing at a D1 or D2 school, you will need to sign up for NCAA. They have some like requirements that they have. Luckily, Westboro is very similar to what they require, so you probably won't have too much of a hard time. They'll want transcripts after junior year, senior year, and your counselors and coaches are great resources. I would say your coaches are like the #1 resource. If you play here at the school, if you do like a club team, your coaches, great resources, and they can kind of help you with, oh, do I need to have footage? Do I need to be contacting schools? Like, what should I do? And so this is from the NCAA website. Students who initially enroll full-time during the 22-23 academic years and intend to play NCAA Division I or II athletics will not be required to take a standardized test to meet NCAA initial eligibility requirements. So just like schools are test optional, NCAA is also test optional. And so if you have any questions, I would look at the NCAA website, the Eligibility Center, just to kind of take a look at that. And then any other questions, there's a section in our handbook about it as well, but also ask us and the coaches, okay? In scholarship, I know a lot of you have asked us about scholarships. We love to call it scholarship season, starting in like January. We have local scholarships that students can apply for, and we also have, students can also apply for national scholarships. I always say to my students in our senior meetings, national scholarships, they don't really like just send those to us, but if you really want to apply to one, send it to us, let us, like, we can look it over, let you know if we think you should apply for it, but that's a lot of research on your end. The scholarships, the local scholarships at least, will be on our school counseling website. We're doing a little revamp this year of our website, so we're hoping it'll be super easy to use, but I guess you'll all be our guinea pigs for that. And there's also going to be a WHS local scholarship application in the spring. The differences between that is that the local scholarships on our school counseling website each have their own individual application, whereas there is one application, the WHS local scholarship application, in the spring, and that puts your name in the pool for a bunch of other scholarships. There's also the Koplik and John and Abigail Adams scholarships, and those are based off of MCAS scores. You get notified if you qualify for either one. John and Abigail Adams scholarship, if you qualify, there's not really anything else you have to do. Koplik, there's a little bit more that you have to do, some additional stuff you have to show them. And this is for state schools in Massachusetts. I know a lot of you are applying to state schools outside of Massachusetts, doesn't count for them. And it just kind of takes a little bit of money off of your overall bill. Anything helps. And then financial aid resources. I love MIFA. Amazing resource. If you have any questions about whether you qualify for financial aid, should I apply for financial aid, they have every resource you could think of, and in the past they've even set up Zoom meetings with families to really get into the process with them. They do a deep dive on the CSS profile, they help support undocumented students, they can do a deep dive into FAFSA, and they also have a webinar about understanding financial aid in Massachusetts. They have all those webinars on the website. I always say to students, like, if you have any financial aid questions, I am not a financial advisor, so I will help the best I can, but I do not give financial advice. So those are amazing resources for all of you. And next, Ms. Urbano, right? Hi, can everyone hear me okay? Great, I'm a little shorter than everybody else. So here is a list of important steps for seniors to focus on during the college application process We've shared this with seniors and we'll continue to highlight it during our senior meetings. The first is completing the junior student and parent questionnaire on Naviance. In addition to our interactions with you, these answers to these questions will help us when writing your recommendation letter. It'll ask you questions about your career goals, your interests, things that you've accomplished, what you'd like us to know about you, what you're proud of. So that will really help us in writing your letter. The second is completing an activity resume. In addition to helping us with our letter to know what you're involved in, it will help you when you're filling out the activities section for the college applications. It's a great document to keep track of your activities, and it'll be easy to copy and paste onto your applications when you're ready. Number 3, having a draft of the college essay. This is important, because we can be your second set of eyes if you'd like, or we can talk about different college essay ideas if you're still thinking of a topic. So having that draft would be really helpful to you and to us. And also, we wouldn't want to highlight anything in our letter that you're already addressing in your essay, or cover it in more detail. The fourth is keeping a college list up to date on Naviance. So it's really important so that we know where we're sending your materials to. And also to make sure that you're having a balanced list of target, reach, and safety schools. Number 5, confirm teacher recommendations, share first deadline with them. It's really important for them to know when you're applying, especially if you're applying early. That way the letters are ready by the deadline. 6, complete counselor/teacher recommendation request form and submitting the transcript request form. I'm going to talk about this in more detail on the future slides. 8, matching your Common App and Naviance accounts. It's important to match your accounts because we'll be sending your materials, and if they're not matched, we cannot send your materials to your Common App schools. And we can show you how to match your accounts if you're unsure. 9, as Ms. Greenspan mentioned, it's your responsibility to send standardized test scores to colleges if you plan on submitting them. And lastly, applying to colleges by necessary deadlines. So the counselor teacher recommendation form is a Google form. You tell us which teachers are writing your recommendation letters. We make sure they have access to Naviance so they can upload your letter when they're ready. This form must be completed at least 4 weeks before the deadline. So for students who have a November 1st deadline, it's really important to fill this form by October 3rd, which is coming up. And in this form, we ask that you copy and paste a link of your college essay, a draft, your activity resume. We ask if you've completed the junior questionnaire. It's really important that you keep us updated with anything new. We really rely on this information. We don't go exactly by what's on Naviance. We rely on what you tell us. So if anything changes, such as a deadline, or you're not relying on a certain teacher to write your recommendation letter, please let us know. Adding colleges to Naviance. So there's 2 places where you can add colleges on Naviance. Colleges I'm thinking about and colleges I'm applying to. Colleges I'm applying to is really important because that's where we're going to be sending your materials to. So if you have colleges in your thinking about list, it's really easy to select them and move them to your colleges I'm applying to list. Schools should be added before the transcript is requested. Make sure you're selecting the right campus. So there's some state schools where there's multiple locations. Be sure that you're adding the correct one. For example, University of Massachusetts, there's 4 locations in Massachusetts, so be sure to select the one that you're applying to. It's unnecessary to answer if you've already submitted the application, but we do ask that you tell us how you're applying. So the options are via Common App, directly to the institution, or a paper application, which is very rare, but there are some schools that still accept paper applications. So please please fill that out so that we make sure that your materials get sent with no issues. The transcript request form is a Google form that you'll fill out at least 2 weeks before the application deadline. You'll indicate which schools you're applying to, and if you're applying early action, early decision, rolling deadline, etc. Each school must be requested, but you can add multiple schools in one submission. So if you're applying to schools early, you can fill it out, and then if you apply to more schools later, you can fill it out again. Please let the counselor and secretary know of any changes. That way we can ensure your materials are submitted. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce Ms. Katie Adams.
so much, Mrs. Durbano. And I don't know about y'all, but I could use that breathing box right now. That's a lot of information. And it's really important to emphasize that we're sharing all of these slides with you, a lot of other resources as well in a Google Drive folder. But first, I want to make sure that you do know how to reach out to your school counselor. We are your point person, and everyone should have gotten some emails already from their school counselor. You know, hopefully these names look familiar, and if you haven't opened up those emails yet, I would definitely go back and do that. We're trying to send short emails. I know I sent a long one, I didn't get much back, so I sent a short one, went a lot better. But there is a lot of information to share. So we're doing our best, but please take your time and please keep an eye out for our emails. There's also some information on Naviance. I think students can still sign up for some college visits, right? That's in Naviance. Our website is under construction, but there's some helpful links up there. So, other resources, like I said, your counselor is your first contact. Our post-secondary planning handbook is another awesome resource. We realize that we spent a lot of time tonight talking about the college application process. Some of you might not be sure yet exactly what you're doing next for the next year. You might be going to college, you might be thinking about a gap year, trade school, apprenticeship, or even employment. Whatever your plans are, I always encourage students to keep their options open for as long as possible if they're not sure. And if you are sure, and you have other plans that weren't talked about in great detail tonight, there is a lot of helpful information in that handbook, and your counselor can also help you as well with that, of course. Also, I mean, you guys probably know YouTube a lot better than I do, but if you just go online, there's a ton of helpful tutorials out there as well. The Google folder that we made to share these slides with you, a link to our handbook, a link to all kinds of helpful information is right there. So it's bit.ly/seniornight23. Again, our handbook, that's a big go-to resource, so it has its own slide. So please check it out. It's a huge, huge document that the counseling department puts a lot of work into every single spring for the upcoming seniors, so a lot of good stuff in there. And here is a QR code. It's our first time doing this on the big screen, so we hope it works. But you should be able to pull out your phone, take a picture, and get a direct link to that Google folder. So feel free to go ahead and take a second to do that. If for some reason that's not working, you know, let your counselor know later. But here's also our website, bit.ly/seniornight23. Everything is in there. So please take your time, go through it later, families, and make sure that you're not missing any important information. If you are, come ask your counselor for help. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Mrs. Deleo.
Can you hear me? Okay, I'm Lindsay Deleo. I am one of the new counselors here at Westboro High. Super excited to be here. So I'll try to keep it short and sweet. They did me a favor and only gave me a few slides, so we'll do this. So senior conferences. Counselors have emailed their senior caseload with instructions on how to book their senior planning meetings. Yet again, as Ms. Adams said, students, check your emails. We have sent blasts through Naviance. I have personally emailed students. I know the other counselors have as well. We want to get these meetings scheduled because of deadlines. We want to meet with you well in advance before your deadline. So it's super, super important. We will prioritize appointments by the application due date, but if you have any pressing questions, email us. Come knock on our door, scan our QR code, we're here. And questions and answers. Parents, we did obviously send out a form asking for your questions, and thank you so much. We read through them, they're awesome. Hopefully, we've answered a lot tonight here. Our goal is to put together a question and answer sheet and upload it to the drive that Ms. Adams shared the QR code for just a few slides prior. And those questions and answers will be sent out shortly. So keep an eye out for those because there were some really good questions. And with that said, thank you so much for joining us. We're really, really, really excited about the turnout tonight. I'm hearing much better turnout than last year, so